One morning in March of 2007, the entire U.S. entertainment world was rocked when Hollywood Truth magazine ran a headline that left people speechless. Burt Lancaster's secret journal had been found. Lancaster, the classic actor of From Here to Eternity, who used to walk with Martin Luther King Jr. in historic marches, left behind not a memoir, but a list of 14 names. They were all legendary stars of Hollywood's heyday. He was not one to speak indirectly. Lancaster referred to them as the most vicious people Hollywood had ever created, revealing the seedy side of those once lifted up by the world. Whatever motivated such a man of principles to pen this last curse when he died? Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and watch the whole video in order to discover this captivating tale. The story starts with the top name on the list, and the one that he thought was most vicious, Kirk Douglas, a beast disguised in a human shell. Kirk Douglas, the iconic star who came to be renowned for playing brilliant heroes on the big screen, was, by Burt Lancaster's hidden diary, concealing an actual monster inside. He was not only a celebrated actor, but a cold-blooded manipulator who would stop at nothing to destroy anyone that got in his way to safeguard his authority. Burt candidly referred to him as a predator under human skin, an individual who would do anything in order to annihilate people who dared to defy him. Douglas reportedly went even further than manipulating casting choices or coercing producers. He was also charged with abusing his authority by behaving improperly towards up-and-coming actresses. One particularly cold story told by Burt was about actress Lisa Avery, who was taken off a top project in 1959 just because she turned down a private dinner invitation from Douglas. It was no accident, but an intentional act of discipline. Just one of many in a lengthy history of domination Douglas allegedly instituted throughout his life's work. In addition to using fame and power to manipulate people, Douglas was alleged to have used illicit drugs as instruments of manipulation, purchasing, distributing, and using them to coerce directors, producers, and co-stars into conformity. Anyone who dared to cross him supposedly was dealt with harshly, ranging from being taken out of productions to being put into perilous situations where silence was the only option for survival. Kirk Douglas was not only a Hollywood legend, says Burt, but a monster who was ready to ruin anyone in his path. But if Kirk Douglas's tale of woe is sufficiently wicked, Natalie Wood's to come is even more appalling. Natalie Wood, the lady with fragile loveliness and eerily tragic eyes, was a woman of razor-sharp intellect and manipulative skill. She reportedly once cornered another actor in a tight spot simply to get him off a film because she didn't like him, says Burt Lancaster. She even faked a fainting spell during the set, shutting down production for a whole 10 hours to coerce the producer into dismissing that actor. Natalie Wood's manipulation instilled a climate of fear in which no one would dare to object, in fear of that disobedience being the death of their career, or worse. Burt Lancaster insinuated that her enigmatic death in 1981 was not accidental, but a price to pay for decades of deception and cunning plots. The Hollywood Reporter journalist alleged that barely weeks before her untimely death, Natalie had threatened to ruin the career of a close friend if they did not want to obey her requests. Her death on that yacht turned into a sordid black mark against Hollywood's history. As rumors ran and her web of deceit was revealed, Burt wrote that the sea did not kill her. It only hid what she had left behind on shore. To him, her death was not only the premature end of a Hollywood star, but the natural consequence of a lifetime spent spinning lethal manipulations. If Natalie's tale sends shivers down the spine, the following is no less horrifying. Mickey Rooney, the guy with a smiley and affable persona, had, Burt reveals, an unimaginably sadistic soul. With his ever-happy movie persona, Rooney was a verbal sadist who enjoyed destroying people, writes Burt in his journal. He would ridicule background extras out loud in front of the whole crew over inconsequential things like their hair or attire. Burt attested that Rooney took pleasure in seeing his victims break, laughing like he had achieved some sick triumph. His meanness spilled over into his home life. Burt attested that Rooney treated his wives as servants within their own households, dictating their every step through intimidation and brutality. His marriages, which were far from romantic tales, were confrontations in which he wore down his partners until they were no longer able to resist. Perhaps the most shocking account was in 1970, when Rooney reportedly slapped his wife on a movie set because she was running behind schedule, injuring her both physically and emotionally. To Burt, Rooney's extensive list of dissolved marriages was not a string of heartbreaks, but a catalog of domestic abuse that imprisoned his victims in cycles of control and terror. Elizabeth Taylor, the formidable Hollywood legend, was next on Lancaster's list. In 1962, while working on Cleopatra at Cinecittà Studios in Rome, Taylor is said to have locked herself in her dressing room and would not open it to anyone just because a co-star wore a dress of the same color as she did. Production was halted for 14 hours as Elizabeth Taylor indulged in what Burt Lancaster called an irrational rage. When the director ultimately did approach her, requesting she come back to set, she replied by pouring a glass of wine into his face, causing the entire crew to stand motionless in shock. Taylor was not just a noted star. She was a manipulator of masters, controlling not only the performances she gave, but also those who stood around her. And as told by Burt, this was only the tip of her more sinister plans. In the 1960s, when she was married to Richard Burton, Taylor reportedly did more than hog the spotlight. She controlled his career and employed their love as leverage to intimidate Hollywood producers into submission. Her marriages to Mike Todd and then Burton were not fairy tales of love, but strategic deals to gain leverage. Burt said she employed deceit to rob men of their fortunes and funneled that authority into molding all that was in her domain. The fifth entry in Lancaster's diary was Spencer Tracy, an on-screen actor who was worshipped but, in Burt's estimation, a devil between the walls. He was a man who maintained a hurricane of rage perpetually simmering, frequently fueled by drink. His drinking, Burt claimed, was no habit but a tool, a calculated form of intimidation to dominate the people around him. Tracy's reputation for rich and subtle acting was dimmed by accusations of sexual assault and physical violence, at times inflicted right on the set. One such event in 1961, while he was shooting Judgment at Nuremberg, involved Tracy smashing a bottle of liquor on a makeup table just because the artist had made a slight mistake. His tactics extended beyond physical force. He allegedly intruded upon co-stars' privacy to keep them under psychological control. Deep down, Spencer Tracy was not the popular hero that the public perceived, but an implacable enforcer of his own will, ready to take down anyone who opposed him. Burt remembered that he could play the saint with a smile, then turn and threaten suicide in order to intimidate a co-star into submission. Second in line was a man with a picture of decency and trust. But underneath, Burt said, was a cold, ruthless manipulator who instilled fear in everyone he came in contact with, James Stewart, the judgmental manipulator. James Stewart, much beloved by the American public for his role as the decent man in It's a Wonderful Life and the moral hero in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, was a shining symbol of integrity in the eyes of the nation. But in Burt Lancaster's portrayal, behind the heroic icon was a cold, calculating judge, a man who would employ every trick at his disposal to protect his seat. One of Stewart's routines, Burt alleged, was to quietly document his co-actors' errors on set and then hand over the notes to the director at the end of the day. This silent sabotage created a climate of tension and mistrust, in which actors felt under constant surveillance, subject to being criticized at any moment, and never knowing when they would be the next victim. Stewart's cruelness, as related by Burt, went even further. In 1957, Stewart was said to have refused to share a scene with a black actor, but instead of displaying overt hostility, he cleverly used the demands of the script as an excuse and intimidated others too afraid to cross him. He didn't just use his prestige. Burt accused Stewart of using dirty tricks, such as forgery, to target actors who stood in his way. With only one forged sheet of paper, Stewart could ruin a reputation and get someone off a production. The strategy was so efficient that no one ever dared to confront him because they were afraid of public disgrace or a shattered career. Burt deduced that Stewart never had to yell. His very presence could make an entire room believe they weren't good enough. The seventh person on Lancaster's list was Marilyn Monroe. a far cry from the delicate, tragic heroine perpetuated by the public. Monroe was portrayed as a presence to be reckoned with who intimidated and harassed directors, co-stars, and studio executives into submission, no matter how unreasonable her demands. When Monroe worked on Some Like It Hot in 1959, she would disappear from set without notice, rendering the whole crew idle for hours, waiting for her return. Burt described that she wasn't just fragile-looking, that fragility became a tool she used to manipulate everyone around her. Her actions were more than troublesome. They crossed over into harassment, disrupting productions and destroying the work of hundreds of others. Monroe's manipulation carried over into her private life. Monroe started a clandestine affair with movie producer Jack Warner in 1961. When Warner proposed that Monroe work with another actor, Monroe purportedly faked an extreme emotional collapse, compelling him to make choices that served her interests alone. This caused chaos on set and caused harm to others, motivated by what Burt called greed and deception. The eighth name on Lancaster's list was Errol Flynn, recalled as swashbuckling Hollywood star of Captain Blood and the Adventures of Robin Hood. Behind the glory, Burt asserted, was a menacing predator who used his charisma and power to abuse and destroy. He gave parties with wild abandon in which drugs, call girls, and violence commingled in terrifying spectacles, leaving victims too intimidated to talk. Flynn claimed to have used his influence to escape harsh punishments, including walking free after his arrest for drug smuggling. With his authority unblemished, he was able to continue his activities without being brought to book. The women Errol Flynn deceived and seduced were merely disposable items to him, discarded carelessly once they had nothing to give. Flynn was not merely a man with dubious morals or violent tendencies. He was, in Burt's phrase, a predator without limits. But Flynn's tale was not the end of it. The next name on Lancaster's list was another Hollywood icon, a figure whose beaconing fame hid an evil secret, a manipulator who lived by intrigue and corruption. His ninth name was Bing Crosby, whom the public remembered as a talented actor who always wore a placid expression and never lost his cool in public. Behind closed doors at home, however, Burt asserted that Crosby's cruelty and manipulation extended to appalling heights. He supposedly heaped relentless emotional abuse on his children, using nothing but a cold, icy stare to destroy their spirit. A chilling episode Burt described involved Crosby making his son stand in the cold without a shirt as punishment for a bad grade, informing him it was to teach the feeling of failure. This was not just emotional abuse. Burt accused Crosby of threatening violence and employing aggressiveness as a means of control over his children as well as other family members. Years later, Bing's own son, Gary Crosby, would corroborate these stories in his autobiography, stating that he would be the son of anyone, even a criminal, before he would be the son of Bing Crosby. His testimony was a sobering witness to the meanness that had infected the walls of their family home. The 10th character in Lancaster's narrative was Gary Crosby himself, the warped mirror image of his father. Gary was not only abused, according to Burt, but a man molded into the mirror image of the cruelty inflicted upon him. Beaten as a child, occasionally with a golf club, he matured into an adult characterized by fury and instability. Accusations dogged him throughout his life, from beating girlfriends to attacking others over minute quarrels. One of the incidents included shattering a film director's windshield just because he had not received an invitation to dine. Gary was also accused of having been involved in drug abuse, prostitution networks, and spontaneous bouts of violence instigated by his failure to keep his emotions in check. Burt explained that Gary didn't know how to love, but only how to terrorize, because terror had been the only thing his father had ever taught him. Burt Lancaster, in his secret journal, revealed the dark underbelly of 14 Hollywood idols and found that beneath the glamour lay a world of violence, manipulation, and cruelty. Gary Crosby, abused by his father Bing Crosby, matured into a warped image of that sadism, an existence plagued with violence, alcoholism, and bitterness. Henry Fonda, renowned as a paragon of virtue, was actually a cold, emotionally abusive person who wielded psychological dominance over family and coworkers in order to hold on to power. Jane Fonda used her celebrity and radical ideology to pressure, divide, and destroy those who were opposed to her. Joan Crawford, in private life, was an abusive mother who employed violence and drugs to tyrannize her children. Lucille Ball, behind her cheerful on-screen smile, was a psychological dictator who kept meticulous accounts of her staff's errors, punished them mercilessly, and even had hidden microphones installed in order to spy upon her staff. Lancaster called his journal a blood-soaked warning about the brutal realities Hollywood has long sought to conceal. And with the years that went by, those pages became not merely a list, but a haunting testament to the industry's darkest secrets. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that you won't miss more outrageous tales like this.